to order. And I just want to start with a roll call vote. Ken Anderton.
Ken Anderton is present.
Tammy Stephenson.
Present.
And Tom Hansel's present. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody's faces. I know we have a pretty full agenda, so we'll keep moving along here. Public testimony, Wendy. Any public testimony this morning?
We have, not to my knowledge, we do have several guests. So Jim, if you want to introduce.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, with your permission, may I introduce important guest? Cheryl Norris is with us today. Cheryl is with Portland General Electric. She is a longtime employee there, I believe over 30 years. I hope I got that right, Ms. Norris. And she is a key member of PGE's Strategic Asset Management team, which is obviously something that's important to all of us and keeping our assets maintained. And Kenzie Berry, who is on the MCDD board and also with PGE, introduced me to Cheryl, and she's here considering whether or not she may want to join your board. So welcome, Cheryl. Thank you for providing your time to us today. And if you'd like to say something, please do. And if not, there's no expectation. Okay.
Well, I will say welcome, Cheryl. This is a public session, so this is the time for a public comment. And then during the meeting, I guess after the meeting, if you'd like to talk to myself, Tanny, or Ken, or follow up with questions with Jim, we strongly encourage that. We would welcome you to look at SDIC in your support as a PG representative.
Maybe having technical challenges because I think she dropped off.
Oh, well, that was well said, Chair Hansel. Thank you. I don't know.
Well, I'm just recognizing the public comment will close, and I want to keep that door open for future conversations.
Okay.
Jim, I think I have her contact information, so after this meeting, I will reach out to her.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I shared a little bit of info with the three of you. So again, your decision as a board, of course. Yeah,
well, one is she has to show some interest in the organization, and just being here this morning is the first step. And thanks, Jim, for identifying her.
All right, thank you.
So going on to item C, presentation of the proposed budget. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your time today. And hope everybody's having a great Thursday so far. Today we have the SDIC proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-23. And I have about 12 slides for you today. We are going to cover a very high level budget summary, what the budget will fund, how we propose to balance the budget, an overview of our reserves and changes in reserves. Then we will proceed to talk about our resources and expenditures proposed for next year and our capital program. And finally, next steps. So with that, when we look at the SDIC proposed budget for 2022-23, it's balanced at right at $3 million of resources and requirements. And included in the resources and the requirements are the reserves, both the beginning fund balance or beginning reserves for resources and the ending reserves for requirements. And you can see the SDIC has some healthy reserves. They have about 100% of total operating expenditures for any year saved in reserves. Beyond your reserves, it's really your capital program next year that that is the major category, and that we'll spend a little bit of time talking about today. And feel free if you have any questions or need clarification, please feel free to stop me or raise your hand, and I'm happy to pause and address those as we go through. You'll also notice that many of my numbers are rounded in the presentation, but in your packet, you should have a detailed set of numbers in the budget that are not rounded.
Ben, just quick
Yeah.
question. I
Please.
guess this is really directed to Tanny. Tanny, did you work with Ben on these numbers?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So when we look at balancing the SDIC budget, our total revenue is $1.5 million. Total expenditure is $1.2 million with a positive cash flow or net impact to our reserves of just over $300,000. So what that represents for the district, what these numbers down below represent are changes in your fund balance from the proposed beginning fund balance of fiscal year 22-23 to the ending fund balance. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you the end result of your proposed year-end reserves. So with that, we're looking to add about $300,000 to your undesignated, add about $150,000 to your capital reserve, and reduce your operating reserve by about $142,000. And that represents the change in those fund balances. And I apologize if that's confusing. But the real story is, at the end of the day, at the end of fiscal year 22-23, we're proposing that you will have just under $1 million in undesignated. Your capital reserve will be very healthy at over $600,000, and your operating reserve at $193,000. And your operating reserve represents at least 2 months of operating expenditures in reserve for any unforeseen circumstances. And I'll pause there before we move on. Any questions or anything I can clarify?
Questions of the board? Nothing for me at this time, Ben.
Thank you. I know this is old hat for people like me and you. Some folks might not appreciate numbers at 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, but that's okay. I'm having fun if you're having fun. Okay, so this budget funds the core mission maintenance of the district, the PMLS project, which we will talk about specifically, a more robust emergency operating plan, and your capital program. We are proposing approximately a 9% rate increase. Again, you have healthy reserves. That 9% increase will yield approximately $80,000 in additional revenue. And now we're going to transition to expenditures. So that rounds out our resources portion of the program. Now, these are expenditures. So, oh, I'm sorry, these are not expenditures. These are still revenue contracts. So we do have still some services to conduct for Multnomah County. We will receive about $7,000 for that. And also in other revenue, this is where, in other revenue category, this is where we are budgeting to receive $428,000 from the state levy grants to go towards the PMLS project. So you'll see that is included in that $437,000 number.
Ben, have we been awarded those funds?
We have not. We do not have final word, but we are very optimistic, and we have placed it in the budget for all districts.
So, you know, I deal with budgets as well, and customarily upon receipt, we would come back and receive those funds at that time. Because what we're doing is we're providing authority to spend, and this spend is contingent on the grant revenue. So I'd like to hear some discussion from the other board members can we not appropriate this when we are notified by the state we've received the funds? Typically, it's a budget modification mid-year, new revenues are realized. We still don't, I mean, why budget it now when we don't know if we're going to receive it? Are we restricted that we'd have to wait another fiscal year, or once we're notified, could we do a budget action at that time to spend the monies?
So fair question. I'll just say one thing to start out off with. The total amount that is requested from the district to pay towards the PMLS project is budgeted in your capital program. So you are correct that if this budget is approved, it will appropriate the full amount that the district is requested to contribute to that project. This revenue, it just reflects, like you mentioned, a contingent revenue. We can remove this revenue from the budget, but I would recommend that we keep like you mentioned, the appropriation to spend the district's contribution on the project.
Correct. We're committed with the PLMS work, and again, that's still subject to the Army Corps' confirmation of they'll fund it, right? So, and I might be jumping ahead on where are we at with that action? This is getting into, are we notified by the Army Corps that we have funding for next year? So this is kind of that same element. We're planning to spend without certainty of receipt of revenues to support the program.
So we do have some news, and maybe I don't have all the sound bites. And Jim, maybe if you want to chime in on the president's budget and the news regarding the core funding.
Can't see who else here. Colin, do you want to give an update? And I'm happy to chime in. Or Keith, I know you were a proponent of including these appropriations in the proposed budget if you're here and want to weigh in. But Chair Hansel, these are valid questions. I would also point out, you'll be seeing today the application for the grant funds. That's now ready to go. So you'll be signing that, Chair Hansel. And you may recall, and I don't have it at my fingertips, maybe Hung or Brian can recall, but in the resolution allowing us to pursue the initial phases of the grants, we promised you that we would come back to seek your approval of the application, your approval of the receipt. So there are several steps before we'd be authorized to spend that money from my perspective. But I do think you're raising valid points, and we could make accommodations if that's the direction the board would like to go. Keith or Colin, do you want to jump in on where we're at with proposal or the steps that in our relative confidence on the grant, Colin?
Yes, these are great questions. I'll just give a quick update on where we are on the grant application and want to keep it somewhat separate. It's obviously contingent, the money going out and us basically asking for the grants to be dispersed is contingent on us being in the Corps' work plan and us moving ahead into the PED process next year. I do want to separate that from what we need to do to apply for the grant, have the contract ready so that we are prepared to be able to make that disbursement. So we were invited to, from our initial intake form, we were invited to do the formal application. President Hansel, you will be receiving that application for signature. It requires the board president to sign that. So you'll be receiving that today. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk through that application with you, and we'll send that in. We are on, or I guess penciled in, tentative to be on the Infrastructure Finance Authority Board's agenda to approve this in June, which is their next meeting. And that puts us on the correct timeline to have the contract in place by October of this year, 2022. So that's really the timeline that we're moving forward with. As far as so that we'll be prepared as the non-federal sponsor for when federal government for in the work plan that we'll be able to actually send our portion of the money to them. For where we are, we're not in the actual work plan right now because that has not been released, but we have some really positive news that we are in the president's budget. So that is most often the projects that are included in the president budget are the ones that are budgeted within the work plan. So have pretty high expectation that we'll be able to move forward with this coming federal fiscal year. So yeah, I don't want to, there's nothing signed, there's nothing in there right now, but this puts us in place to be prepared to go with the Corps as soon as that money comes in. Yeah, and Evan, I don't know if you want to add any more detail there. And of course, this is all outside of what you need to see in the budget, but we really need to be prepared as far as having these grants in and the money to be able to go out to the federal government so that we can keep participation.
Keith, do you want to share anything about adopting the appropriations now as opposed to doing a budget amendment later to realize?
Sure, I'll weigh in kind of on budget process. I think I would generally agree we would not want to budget grant revenue if it was pretty speculative, or if the failure to receive the grant would then leave a hole in the budget that could create risk for that. I don't think that's the case in this one, and I don't think it's overly to only budget grant revenues that are actually awarded. There's an argument to be made for doing it that way, but it is a very conservative means of budgeting that I don't think is required by budgeting. The theory in doing the budget the way we did was that we have adequate appropriations and they're supported by the revenues that assume this grant is going to be received. If it's not received, the offsetting expenditures, they could be balanced by not doing the project, but then there's still going to have to be some discussion on how that work gets done to move this project forward. Our theory in doing the budget was to get the appropriations we need to do the work we expect to do next year without having to come back to the board to amend the budget. I don't think that's an unreasonably aggressive approach or puts the district at risk in going that way. But certainly if the board is not comfortable doing that, we can go the other route. It just requires an extra step to amend the budget when we receive the grant to be able to expend those funds.
Thanks, Colin. Thank you, Keith. That does help. I understand the nuances. It's just, I just don't want to get the cart before the horse here, kind of thing. And budget law allows, budgeting allows us to realize revenue and appropriate it when it's realized. And there's just a lot of things predicated on top of one another here, and I just don't want to have SDIC get out ahead of itself, and staff are moving forward until everything has come in as we're expecting it to. But what I'm hearing is, if some of these assumptions don't play out, you'll come back to the board and chart a new path or have a discussion at that time. Yeah, I don't want to create additional work. I just wanted to, having this discussion is really helpful for me. Just different ways to plan and set a budget that's going to be achievable. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I'll just add, Tom, that the port regularly we will budget for revenue that we have a fairly certainty that we're going to get, like grants or even say a business transaction that we're negotiating that's really close. So,
yeah.
From a staff perspective, that is helpful in that you don't have to go through multiple processes if it's a certain. So I support Keith's view on this. Just wanted to get that out there.
I appreciate that, Ken.
Chair Hansel,
Danny, please.
if you're concerned, couldn't we just make the appropriation predicated on receiving the grant?
I think I've heard that that's kind of the condition here is if the grant doesn't materialize, we'll be, Keith and company and Jim will be coming back for a discussion.
Certainly have our commitment to that, but if the board prefers the alternative approach, it's doable. So I want you guys to feel confident in moving forward, and we definitely don't want to create any additional risk for the landowners. That's not our objective here. So I think you're raising good questions, Tom.
No, thank you. Just having this discussion, as I said, helps me formulate how staff and other board members are considering this. So I'm fine moving forward as the budget's presented. Ben, thank you for entertaining this question. Back to you.
Of course, our pleasure. Appreciate the insight. That concludes our revenue portion. Now we're going to transition to expenditures, beginning with materials and services. When we look at M&S, we're proposing a $113,000 increase in M&S. You'll notice that a majority of that $113,000 is an increase in outside counsel expenditures. And I believe that we've had conversations with SDIC about this outside counsel number. There's only two categories in materials and services that I'm going to highlight further and go into a little bit more detail, and that's the projects and planning and also the contracts portion. When we look at non-capital projects, this is a list of all of the non-capital projects included in the SDIC budget. These represent portions of the SDIC portions of projects on agency-wide initiatives. So every district is going to have a extremely similar list with their respective portions to these initiatives. Overall, this $71,000 proposed in the budget represents a $4,000 decrease from the prior year. That's 5%. And the houseless coordination up at the top, the $17,000 represents a $14,000 increase over the prior year. And you will hear a terrific presentation from Aster about houseless coordination. So if you want more detail, if you could hold on to that, because Aster has all the details ready to present later on. When we look at our, this is the other.
I do want, Ben, I do want to emphasize that we have tried to be pretty rigorous in attributing those homeless services costs based on activity in the different districts. So, and I'm sure that Aster or somebody who's closer to those calculations can explain them more thoroughly than I can, but I wanted you to know that we are trying to be cognizant of the different impacts on different areas of the system and trying to attribute those costs appropriately. So we could probably get into that if that's important to you guys.
That's my understanding as well, based on activities and future needs for eco blocks and signage, cleanup, those sorts of things attributable to geographic areas like Jim mentioned. This is the only other category in materials and services that I'm going to go into detail on. Everything else is status quo compared to prior year budgets. The JCA contribution is up 5%. That is consistent across the board. So every partner contribution to the JCA is up 5% this year per the IGA. And then also MCDD is up $29,000, 20%, which might sound like a lot, but this number represents our estimation, our forecast of non-capital project work that MCDD will be completing on behalf of the district. And this number also is extremely similar to the actual number paid by SDIC to MCDD for that same work, that administrative work in 2021. So even though it looks like a significant increase over the prior year budget, it's insignificant. It's identical to what the district paid in 2021.
And thanks for that clarification. It's nice to put it in perspective on historical context.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, and don't forget the priceless nature of the services you receive.
That's right.
It's
Yeah. Value added to the SDIC program. We much appreciate it.
And this is the capital program. Again, we have this 535 on the PMLS project represents an equal distribution across 4 districts with the assumption that we will get the state levy grants and also allocate those equally across the 4 districts, the 428. So what that means is if and when we receive that grant and each district pays their portion, the 535, each district portion will be approximately $107,000. And please excuse my missing 0 there. That's $107,000. So that is each district's portion. To round out the capital program, there are access gate replacements, and I can tell you that these access gate replacements is a new project proposal, and that is consistent across all the other districts. My understanding is that operations is having some issues with gate access and those gates being broken into, driven through with vehicles and such, and so they're beefing up the entry points on all gates across the system. The SCADA system upgrade, the OSHA fall protection, which I'm sure you're familiar with, it's been going on for a couple of years, and then the gate tower and pipes. This $11,000 is a smaller portion than MCDD's portion. I think, Tanny, we talked about this a little bit in detail, that this is just SDIC's portion on the beginning phases of that project. And there's a higher number that MCDD is also contributing towards that phase. So it's a shared expense. This is a repeat slide, so just wanted to share with all of those dynamics going through the budget next year. At the end of the day, we're still proposing that the district will have just under $1 million in undesignated reserves, $600,000 in capital, and 2 months, at least 2 months of operating reserve for unforeseen circumstances. With that, I know this slide is busy, but this is the summary of the SDIC budget. It is included in your packet, as well as the detail of each of these line items expanded. I just included this to just ask for any points of clarification or questions that you might have before we close.
Ken or Tammy?
No questions.
So my only question is what's our communication to our property owners on increasing our reserves, the undesignated funds? You know, I know there is it's just, what's the reason for that? When we know the urban is being stood up to take care of the future capital, is this buildup in undesignated funds consistent across all 4 districts? I trying to I need to have a sound bite. Why are we building it up? Why not just have a 3% increase to our rates?
Good, fair question. I'll give you 2 thoughts from my perspective. So one way that the board could look at this is, if for any reason we don't receive the state levy grants, that's $428,000, right? That the district wouldn't receive. And so we could see that undesignated reserve drop by that amount, $428,000, if you did decide to proceed with the contribution to the PMLS project. That's just one scenario. It's not likely, but that would show that the district is well prepared to move the PMLS project forward and prepared financially to contribute to it. That's one perspective. Another perspective is that the board has full control over that rate increase. We propose a 9% increase to each of the 4 districts. However, the board has the full autonomy to set that rate as it wishes.
I appreciate that, Ben. I'm just sensitive to the inflationary impacts businesses facing currently. And I'm just a signal of a 9% increase that is going into unobligated reserves. It's just like that just is a little uncomfortable for me. You know, Tanny, have you got any, can you help me
Yeah,
justify?
I can tell you, I'm a proponent of a max of 3% increase, if not a 0. And some of that's being selfish, just me thinking about my own personal safety. Having to go out there and justify this. And like I said, I'd like to see a max of 3. Because, you know, you look at what we've done with assessments over the past 7 years. I know we had to, but we've increased them 264%. And I'm
Thanks for
still
that
hearing
reminder.
about that.
Thank you, Tanny.
Sure.
Ken, your thoughts, if you want to share?
I don't have any thoughts.
So Ben, Keith, could we make 3% work? Jim, you as well. I mean, again, it's.
Yeah, Tanny raised this during the budget liaison meeting, and it's my impression from having a brief conversation with Ben and Keith that we could do that. I think what it means is a little bit farther, a dip into your reserves. But again, the total increase is 80,000, so it's workable. I believe I'm correct. Am I, Keith?
Yeah, I wouldn't have any concerns about it. I think 9% was consistent across all the districts, and other districts were in a position where that was necessary. I think here, if we didn't go with the 9% and went with the lower amount, it doesn't create undue risk in this budget at all.
I think
I
it was
agree.
like 2024 or something it was going to give us if we went 3%. Right?
Yeah, again, 24,000 versus 80,000. I mean, it's not significant in the larger scheme of things, but it's the optics of 3% versus 9%. That's you know, it's 300% more on an increase. So I'm just sensitive to that, given the inflationary impacts all businesses are facing right now. So
Absolutely.
Amazon, I think they could probably handle it, but the others maybe not so much. So Keith or Ben, I guess this is just a discussion today. Take our input. I think I'm leaning towards 3% as well. I don't think we need a motion today, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I think 3% is more in my comfort after having the briefing and the understanding of what this budget can support and deliver, and will not disrupt our commitment to the PLMS work.
Not at all.
I think what would be helpful, just so we can bring you back a budget that is fully supported by everyone at the next meeting, is if we can just get, is there consensus on dropping it to 3%, or is there any objection to that?
Hearing none, I think it's fair for us to bring you back at the format meeting a budget that reflects that 3% instead of 9%. And that's clear direction from the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great segue into our last slide. We are scheduled to come back to this board May 17th, and we can bring back a budget that reflects that 3%. Thank you so much for your time today and your interest and your engagement. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and a shout out for Tanny for spending some extra time to walk through some of these things with us, both not only for SDIC, but for the urban board as well. So we do really appreciate your oversight on this. It's pretty critical to public trust and the next steps being successful. So thank you for your oversight.
No problem. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank Keith, but also really a shout out to Ben. Outstanding job. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Tanny and Jim's statements as well, recognizing Tanny again for your service as treasurer. You brought it up. I mean, this district has really taken some measures to build a revenue base that can support the operational maintenance needs that the district needs to address. So, I don't like separating from what the other three districts are doing, but it also says we're all a little different too as well. So not going with the rate increase that the others are doing, and we aren't subject to compression as well. So it's a little bit of an apple and oranges here, I feel. So. And Keith, thank you for your leadership in the financial arena. We still really have yet to meet and have a discussion, but welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yeah, both you and Ben have been fantastic in terms of the financials, and we have a lot of confidence in what you're producing. So we appreciate that. And I agree that SDIC's now got some major employers that provided a huge base as well. It's a lot more, if you look at the districts, a lot more diverse set of industries and governments that are part of it. So it's good to see this district has got some sound financial footing.
Let's hear it for the TRIP project. Chair Hansel, I would note that Cheryl Norris is back if you wanted to repeat the kind words that you said earlier.
Cheryl, welcome. Glad you're able to listen into our meeting today. I hadn't noticed you were unable to hear my earlier comment. I was really inviting a follow-up discussion after this meeting today or another date. If you have any follow-up questions with, I think, Tanny, myself, or Ken Anderton, just to where you have a complete picture of what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve here.
Thank you for the welcome. Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi kept going in and out, so I just had to disconnect and reset it.
Yeah, that never happens to us. So,
and again, I don't know whether you could hear my introduction, but I did share that you've been a long time Portland General Electric employee, and you're expert in strategic asset management, which of course is important to any infrastructure operation. And I just wanted to say thank you for taking time to speak with me earlier and for sharing some of your time with us today. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, for allowing me to sit in and observe a meeting. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Again, I'm moving off of the budget topic onto Houseless coordination update. Aster, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Aster Moulton. I'm the Public Affairs and Community Relations Specialist with the districts, and part of what I do is manage our response to houselessness and illegal dumping within the drainage districts. Presenting with me is Randy Lyons, our Operations Manager, and Michael Phelps, who's with Cascadia Behavioral Health. I'll let Randy and Michael introduce themselves, starting with Randy.
Hey everybody, Randy Lyons, operations manager. So hanging out with the ops team and supporting them in every way I can. And I can play, I think a liaison between the admin world and the ops world. So thanks for having me. And if I haven't met you, it's my pleasure.
Hey, I'm Michael Phelps. I'm the program supervisor for Cascadia's street outreach team, and I'm sort of the lead contact for our coordination with the whole Multnomah County Drainage District system. Trying to meet the people out there, spread the word about the actual infrastructure that's going on, and sort of play as a liaison between the folks that are living out there and Randy and Aster and the whole program. So. Good to be here. Thanks for listening to us.
Thank you all for your work in this arena. It's much needed and appreciated. And Michael, I'm sure you regularly get questioned on your name. Quite the accolades or the accomplishments with that name.
Oh yeah, figure after all the medals I can come help the people.
Well, and combined with Michael Jordan, who's our board chair on the urban side, we're rife with opportunities to sell autographed things. Maybe it's a new revenue source for us that we haven't fully pursued. I don't know.
All right, well, thanks for having us. Let's keep going. So today I'm going to talk about what the program purpose is, the program background. Michael's going to give an overview of what Cascadia does. Randy's going to talk a little bit about the challenges, the safety challenges for our operations crew. I'll go over our areas of work by each district and what our response has been, as well as some of the program successes and challenges and the fiscal year 22 SDIC spending. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the program is threefold. First is to provide education and supportive housing services to individuals living outside within the drainage district service area, with a focus on those camped on or around flood safety infrastructure. And that's mainly due through our awesome partnership with Cascadia. Second is to clean up illegal dumping on and around our flood safety infrastructure to provide better access for our operations crew. That's done through our contract with Rapid Response, as well as in collaboration with a lot of different organizations and agencies. And really those two goals build to what is our ultimate goal, to improve safety and efficiency for MCDD staff as they're going into their field and doing their work. Next slide, please. So the program started as a 6-month pilot project in 2018 in partnership with Cascadia Behavioral Healthcare. And thanks to the board's support, this became an ongoing program, which received the Special District Association of Oregon Award for an outstanding special district program in 2019. And I think, as we all know, since 2020, the drainage districts have experienced a higher concentration of not just houseless activity, but also illegal dumping and criminal activity. And we know that illegal dumping and criminal activity is not necessarily attributed to the houseless community, but we've seen an increase in all of those things. And as a result, our response has become more robust. We've implemented additional safety and security measures beyond in partnership with Cascadia to address all those issues. And the boards adopted a resolution this past fall, which has given staff the authority to manage this type of activity on the district's flood safety system to ensure public safety regardless of jurisdiction. So that's been a really important tool for us to have in place. And next, I will pass it off to Michael to give a brief overview of what Cascadia does.
Hey, so yeah, thanks for listening to us again. Yeah, Cascadia in general is a community health agency providing mental health services, substance use services, gambling, addiction services to the community for an affordable cost or at no cost for some individuals. We also provide housing and like inpatient treatment for people experiencing mental illness. We got like health centers, 4 of them around town, as well as some, residential treatment facilities all over. And, as far as the street outreach team goes, which is our program, specifically, we do outreach on the street all over Multnomah County, trying to get people who are experiencing homelessness connected with mental health services, benefits and entitlement services, as well as then trying to get people into community-based housing and hopefully then connected with either like employment services for an income or some sort of long-term subsidy so that you can get people off the street into a home and back on their feet and just a stable member of society.
And yeah, next we have Randy to talk about the cruise safety challenges.
Hey, everybody, once again. I think everybody can pretty much imagine that there's been a lot of safety challenges associated with this, and especially in the last couple of years. One of the biggest things just want to bring up is one of the things that it's hard to kind of gauge and see, but it's the mental fatigue and exhaustion and honestly trauma. There's just consistent exposure to a lot of uncomfortable and situations, and just seeing people and like this levels of living in this manner. It's, we're human beings, and it has a big effect on myself and the guys on the crew out there every day. So that's been a big challenge, and we're working on trying to figure out to get some more tools to work on that. To talk about situations, we've been in a lot of situations, especially out at Pump Station 4, lots and lots and lots and lots of people discharging firearms. I've personally been out there 4 or 5 times and heard all kinds of gunshots just right in the woods, and that wears on you. So it's real, and we're navigating through it, and we got a lot of support from the top down to keep trying to improve and approach our work as safe as we can. But that's a big one. Another one too is just all the associated with the communities out there and the illegal dumping, the houseless communities, all the trash that there is, all the debris piles we work in, our access points, raking grates, working in the slough. There's just so much stuff that we don't know what we're handling: needles, trash, human waste. And that continues to be a big deal. And we have some protocols and stuff in place, all hands off, using tools, different things. But and at these sites, if you're in the slough or if you're, raking a grate, every day can be different. Somebody could dump, 1,000 needles at a spot where we're supposed to be, keeping water flowing. So that's been a big challenge, and we talk about it all the time, but it's real and it's pretty consistent out there. So also been a tough one to navigate. We definitely have a lot of disruption to our projects and annual maintenance. The mowing team is one big one. They start out west and mow the levees all the way out east and do ditches coming all the way back. And that's a 4-month process. And we've had some near misses. The grass gets real tall as we start mowing, and some spots 6 feet tall, and individuals passing out in tall grass. It's hard to see. So, or it's unforeseen trash, breaking our equipment. We got a process and protocols in place for that too, but you can only see so much. We even have infrared cameras now and mounted on our cameras, but it's just a tool, and it's a tough thing to navigate, and we've had to skip locations. Luckily not so much out in SDIC. There's big communities out on the water that generally those levee systems are pretty manageable, but overall the system, there's been a lot of issues associated with that. So and I think I already brought up the slough work. It's tough. You're really in some remote areas, and you feel really exposed in some of these real back waterways and stuff. And I want to always give empathy to people, but the truth is a lot of people you interact with have weapons and different things. So we know people have firearms, and so we try to do what we can. And there's certain locations we don't even, certain sections we don't even go through because we just don't feel comfortable. So a lot of challenges associated with this work, and I'm super proud of my team and the work we get done. And I really want to just appreciate the work Aster's done, and Michael and Chris and the whole team with Kim, me and Michael and Chris especially, well, and Kim. I've got an awesome relationship, and we've been doing this for a few years now, and we've seen it evolve. The program, we won an award back in 2019, but it's completely evolved since then. So we're still making progress and just plugging away. But I think that's all I got. If you got any questions, let me know, but I'll stop talking. I think I only have 2 minutes and I probably went over.
Annie, Ken, any comments for Randy?
No comments.
Michael or Esther?
Just want to acknowledge the crew's hard work and also Michael's help in navigating some of these spots that are challenging. So thank you, Randy, and thanks to the team.
I just like to say, great job, Astor and Michael and Randy. But on the other side, I'm embarrassed that our people have to do this. And frankly, that we're involved in this. Troutdale's got kind of a pretty hardline policy that they want us to follow. And this isn't something SDIC should be doing. It's not part of our core mission. And I think we need to look, regionally at those folks, because I mean, this isn't something we're in business to do.
Yeah, I will say, and something we'll talk about a little later, is we are leveraging a lot of resources from other agencies, from the City of Portland, Port of Portland, Joint Office of Homeless Services, and so yeah, what I'm talking about today and the work we've been doing is really just a small portion of the overall work that we've been doing, and we've really been targeting our illegal dumping cleanup and houseless outreach to areas very specific to where the crew needs to access our infrastructure for emergency operations, as well as ongoing regular maintenance. But yeah, it's, it is definitely a struggle for everyone, and it's something that can't be solved overnight and certainly can't be solved by just one agency.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize Astor's point for the board, and we've shared the same thing at the MCDD landowners meeting and other places where there's concern both about the public sector doing more overall, but also what our mission is and what our focus needs to be. So I do want to assure you that we are doing our best to really focus this program on areas where we have critical maintenance and access needs, and working hard with our partners to try and generally elevate the overall response in the floodplain, and we're seeing some traction there. But want to let you know we're mindful of our role, and we do try and remain focused. But I appreciate you bringing that point up.
And hear me, I'm not questioning that at all. I think everybody's doing a great job. It's embarrassing to me that our people have to wear, bulletproof vests and go out with armed security to do their job. It's just a really bad situation.
In that particular area, this was potentially something Astor's going to talk about, but we are seeing some pretty significant action coming from the City of Portland and the county to do more work around Pump Station 4. And just this week, Randy's working with a lot of the operations teams that are impacted by that site to come up with an access control plan once a broader effort to notify and get those folks some alternative places to go happens, which again, nothing's for certain until it's certain, sort of like a grant from Business Oregon. But we hear in the next several weeks that we should see some pretty significant activity out at that end of the floodplain.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're all excited for that work. I know the City of Portland now has an incident command structure to respond to houseless activity, which you might have read about in the news. So I think that their response is more organized, and the Big Four Corners area is a top priority for them. All right, so let's talk a little bit about where we've focused our energy, where the drainage districts have by district. So the red dots indicate areas of either current or past houseless activity or illegal dumping. In Pen 1, we've focused activity and outreach in Vanport wetlands. There were a couple people camped there, and that's an area that floods seasonally. So we definitely didn't want people, potentially inundated with water. I want to plug that that's also a really important part of our partnership with Cascadia Behavioral Health. The houseless community is often most vulnerable to flood risk because they're likely to be camped in natural areas that flood first. So this partnership is an opportunity to do early outreach in cases where areas might experience seasonal flooding, but also in the case of an emergency. Also in Pen 1, there's been some camping around I-5. Cascadia has done outreach around that area. And there was a camp in Pen 2 located near the Bridgeton Slough at about 2nd and Marine Drive. And that camp has been cleared out this past year. And there's been some camping around Pump Station, Schmear Road Pump Station. That area has been cleared out a couple times as well. There's also been some outreach done in Delta Park and along the Schmear Road levee. Next slide, please. The bulk of the work has been in MCDD. As you probably all know, there are a bunch of RVs parked along Northeast 33rd. We were able to work with Rapid Response and PBOT and Port of Portland and Cascadia to clear a buffer around the culverts that run underneath Northeast 33rd so that we can maintain them in accordance with our IGA with the Port of Portland and keep the airport dry. So that's been a successful project. We've also done a lot of outreach along Marine Drive. There's concentration of houseless activity going from I-205 eastward. So that's an ongoing effort. We've also done work around Northeast 142nd, though I think the city of Portland is now leading that work. And we've done a lot of work at the Big Four Corners area near Pump Station 4, which I will talk about a little later. Next slide, please. And in SDIC, there honestly hasn't been as much activity in SDIC, but there has been some houseless camps near Sundial Roads, in Sundial Wetlands, and along Marine Drive. And if you have any questions about the SDIC activities specifically, I think Michael would be able to address that. But right now, really, the majority of work is in MCDD and Pen 2. And as Jim mentioned, we are, if you were to compare across the districts how the budget is allocated, we are trying to proportion that equitably. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our response has been more robust than in previous years. Of course, we're still working with Cascadia Behavioral Health Care. I like to say we have a service-first approach when engaging the houseless community, which is pretty unique for the public sector. A lot of public agencies go straight to enforcement, and we try to avoid that wherever possible because we know that a lot of the houseless community members have trauma associated with law enforcement present. However, we will utilize law enforcement as available in areas where prolonged camping has either resulted in potential safety risks, such as Pump Station 4, or extended operational delays. As we all know, we don't have that enforcement capability ourselves, so we have to partner with public agencies to do that, and it's really based on the capacity that they have. But more and more, this area has become more of a priority for law enforcement. We've also placed ecology blocks in strategic locations where we want to limit unwanted illegal dumping or abandoned vehicle access or camping access. Oftentimes we'll clean an area and then place ecology blocks to secure that area. Pump Station 4 is a good example of where we've done that, as well as 142nd Cross Levee, as well as Marine Drive. And as we all know, as we've talked about, we have additional security measures now in particularly high-risk areas. We have armed guards when needed, guards on the security guards on the MCDD campus, as well as ballistic vests for our crew so they can be safe and feel as safe as possible working in areas where there have been previously violent or potentially violent interactions and gunshots, like in the Pump Station 4 area. Illegal dumping cleanup, that's something we've done both ourselves and in partnership with other organizations. I'll touch on that a little bit later. Signage implementation, we've already started implementing signage such as the one to the right, to really communicate to people what our expectations are for how people interact with our flood safety infrastructure. That's for the houseless community as well as the general public. So we've implemented signage like this at Pump Station 4 and around Schmear Road, and you can expect signage like this to pop up in some areas in SDIC as well. And as we've talked about so far, there's been a lot of interagency coordination to get this work done, and that's in large part thanks to Jim's leadership and connections. And yeah, we've been able to leverage some really great resources. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about some key successes with this program, and we'll start with Michael talking about some successes out in the field.
Hi again. Thanks for listening. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so, I think the main successes, you can see the data on the screen, but, just being able to make contact with the people that are out camping in the whole floodplain and flood management system, building relationships and rapport with them to give them, act as a liaison between the operations crews and the people staying out there, and giving them a heads up and, trying to encourage them to be cooperative with the crews, which, letting them know that, hey, there's mowing coming through on this week, there's this operations coming through on this week, as well as then just providing education so that the folks that are camping out there know that this whole flood management system is a man-made system that's crucial for maintaining the safety of Portland as a whole, so that they aren't trying to minimize damage to the levee system and encourage low impact camping, as well as then offering those services to people that are staying out there who want to engage with the services that we provide. We're also out there every week providing trash bags, encouraging people to keep their camps clean, and responding to severe weather events to make sure that people don't, die in the cold or die in the heat. As far as sort of anecdotal recent successes, this just yesterday I found out that 3 folks that we've moved away from the drainage district have been approved for permanent housing subsidies. So that's a big win. One of those was one of the men who was staying near I-205, had built a large structure and was in the media, talking about how hey, I never get any help. Well, he's just got approved this week for a housing placement, and then very quickly got a permanent supportive housing voucher as well. So I think just being able to coordinate with people out there and coordinate with Randy and Aster to try to identify, problematic areas, as well as for safety, identifying places that, there is some unsafe behavior and unsafe situations going on, so that Randy and his crew are aware of those situations before they go in. And then, like I said, building rapport with the folks that are staying out there to try to let them know hey, Randy and his crew, they're cool. They're not here to bother you. They just sort of need you to move out of their way so that they can get their job done. And then, y'all can just go about your business. So, that's kind of where we're at out there. It is a struggle. I recognize Randy and his crew's hardship, because it is rough out there. I think the pandemic really took a toll on our community as a whole. But as things are opening up and gears are starting to turn again, I am seeing things happening. Things are getting better. And, I've got good hope for the future of this program. And as far as the SDIC, frankly, there is not a ton of activity out there, but it's good to, do the rounds, cruise through, and be able to, if Randy calls me up and says hey, there's some sketchy folks hanging out in this area and we need to get there this week, then me or someone on my team can go out to that spot, talk to whoever's out there, figure out what's going on, and then report back to Randy and Aster about what the situation is on the ground level. And if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Well, if there's no questions for Michael at this time, we can move on, talk about some other areas of success in the program. So I'm sure you all remember the Fairview Lake flooding that happened over Veterans Day weekend. That was due in large part because our crew couldn't physically access Pump Station 4, in addition to some of the criminal activity that was happening there and is continuing to happen there. There were vehicles in the way, abandoned vehicles. There was large piles of debris, and we needed access. So we partnered with a lot of different private businesses, agencies, and nonprofits to help remove a lot of the vehicles and debris and do outreach there so that we could have access to Pump Station 4. And now Pump Station 4 is fully operational. That's a picture of our crew doing work at the pump station in early January during a pretty rainy weekend. There was no flooding that weekend, in large part due to the fact that our pumps were operating, which was great. And as Jim mentioned, next steps in this area is for the city of Portland to do a more comprehensive cleanup. And that means removing all vehicles, all debris, all people. I know that the city is will be working hard with navigation teams such as Cascadia and other groups to help connect people living there to resources. Next slide. We've also been doing a lot of outreach and houseless camp relocation and cleanup activities along Marine Drive with the Port of Portland. We've had a lot of support from both Portland Police Bureau and more recently Port Police in not so much formally posting the area, but rather casually going out and communicating to people in partnership with Cascadia, the purpose of the levee and how this is really not the best place for people to camp. And this is one of our key outreach areas right now because it is, one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure for us in terms of flood safety. And we really need access to it in case of an emergency and also for our annual operations. We do have plans to secure the area with ecology blocks and Jersey barriers, placing it in strategic locations to limit unwanted vehicle access. We've had a lot of success around I-205 and more recently around 138th and east of there on the riverward side of the levee. This was a solve event in early January. That's I-205 in the background, and it was my favorite event so far. It was a really sunny day in January. We had over 50 people and we collected about 8 tons of trash in just one day. So that was really exciting. We've had about 4 solve events so far. And we've also had rapid response go out there as well. And throughout our efforts with rapid response, there's been about 5 efforts, mostly in Pen 2 and MCDD, and they've been able to pick up around 25 tons of trash for us. That's been an awesome resource. Next slide, please. Yeah, and these were the metrics that I was just talking about. Rapid response, 5 cleanup efforts, 25 tons of trash, which has been awesome. Here's a solve cleanup event in Schmear Road. And through solve events, we've also been able to leverage over 100 volunteers, as well as nearly just over 21,000 pounds of trash. Next slide, please. Sorry, one second. So we've encountered some challenges, of course, some of which we've already talked about. There's been at times limited law enforcement capacity, and there's oftentimes a public misconception that we have that ability. So that's a constant communication challenge, letting people know what we can do ourselves and what we have to collaborate with other agencies to implement. There's those life loss safety concerns that Randy has mentioned. There is some superficial levee damage along Marine Drive. And right now there are limited relocation options if people are not interested in the resources that Cascadia is providing. But I do know, I was just at a webinar last night talking to the folks that are doing the Safe Village rest sites, and those are planned to come online pretty soon. So we're hoping that once those are available, there will be more relocation options for people. Next slide. So SDIC spending so far this fiscal year, we've had about 1,800 go towards Cascadia outreach. And there's been about 2,700 towards just general administration of the program, and then small little community relations contribution to the graphics that are going on our signs that will be distributed throughout the districts. And I think that's all I have for you. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Open up for questions. Ken, I think you had a comment earlier that you weren't able to communicate.
No, I was just appreciative to Aster and team about the hard work. The port is struggling with this same issue as well. And so it's a very difficult dynamic situation that's ever evolving. And it's not the port's core business either to handle homelessness, but it impacts our ability to operate an airport. And I think the parallels here are really, similar, and all the jurisdictions have to just work together to solve this really complex issue. So I just appreciate staff's time to dig into this and try to find solutions where they can. So,
Thanks, Ken.
We've definitely benefited from the cooperation and support of the port and the county. So everybody's doing what they can.
I'll just echo what Tanny had shared earlier, and Ken, Cheryl and Michael, thank you for your support of allowing Randy and his crews and engineers and project managers to work in the district. I also appreciated hearing, SDICs, I have this SDIC boundary hat on. So, tying it back to us helps me immensely. I drive Marine Drive and I see, that was a beautiful house that guy was building on the levee, but just like, how long were we going to allow that? I mean, he had a much nicer deck than I'll ever have, but that isn't supposed to happen. Randy, I just want to, again, I think reinforce from all the SDIC commissioners that, we are here to support you and your team. Please convey that to them. I'm seeing not a lot in SDIC, so, if there's anything that comes up, move through your chain of command. We will do whatever we can to support you. I'm really troubled by, one is I appreciate your candor, but wearing, bulletproof vest as a operations maintenance worker seems outside the job description. I'd be curious to know if this new level of trauma and workforce trauma is impacting your ability to keep people employed. Are they choosing to move elsewhere, or how are you handling that? Are you seeing a high level of vacancies with your positions? Are people leaving?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm really surprised. We've had zero turnover. There's a lot of great benefits here, and every individual has to, make a decision on what they're willing to do and weigh those, those pros and cons. We've had zero turnover. We got a small crew. These guys have been here for years. We just hired a new guy. But we got multiple people most of our crew has been here 10, 12, 22 years. People stick around, but this has been challenging, and I guess I'm proud that nobody has left. Not to say it wasn't rocky throughout the time. So I guess that's the answer to that. We haven't lost anybody.
Just share one of the crew members said we were having a big group session to talk through things we could do and things we couldn't do, and I think they really appreciated the dialogue with some of us in leadership, but the words of one of them really echo in my mind, which is talk's cheap, show me some difference. And so that's where we're really focused on trying to make a difference on the ground. And the crew's actually been really creative in offering ideas to us. So again, it is a tough situation, but so far I think we're progressing towards a better future at this point, thanks to everybody's efforts. So
I would say too, I think, you know, how are they managing this? And I think there's more mental health days. You know, I think sometimes people just need a break. Maybe a little more than before. So yeah.
And I was,
Sorry, President Hansel, I did have a question. We've got Article 13 in the bylaws that has certain enforcement mechanisms for landowners that have allowed these kinds of activities to happen. Has there been any pursuit of any of those kinds of recompense for those kinds of activities? Because those are dedicated provisions within the bylaws that allow those kinds of remunerations for those activities. So I was just, and if there's been any difficulties in either pursuing those or enforcing those.
it's a really great question, Brian. Thanks for bringing it up. We've not had the need for that within SDIC. We have, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this, but we have rattled that saber with a couple of landowners in other districts, and we have reached out to a city attorney with some concerns about that. We've also held up our easements and the fact that the statutory authority says you're creating a blockage. And typically what's happened is when we've elevated to that level, we've seen a response without having to actually go through the civil enforcement process, which is our goal, to avoid having to do that. The other thing I would say is that a lot of the land where we have these issues are public agency partners who are also under similar stress and are trying to dig out. So the prayer for relief might not be that significant under the circumstances. So we're trying to weigh the partnership and the efforts we see people gearing up for with the need to maintain access and flood safety. So we are aware of it. We've wielded it as a threat. We've not implemented it anywhere at this time. And we are seeing, again, the landowners with the biggest issues starting to take a little bit more direct action. We reserve the right, however, to pursue those actions should we need to.
Okay, great, thanks.
I really appreciate the discussion. Any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to move on. Thank you to our guest. Can't thank you enough.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So item E, we are fortunate to have an application for a vacant seat 4 in the SDIC board. This isn't a new name. Pen 1 Commissioner Annalise Kohler has put a request, her employer has put a request in for her to fill that vacant seat. I talked to Annalise, I will share on the phone. You heard her on the Pen 1 in our format meetings. There was the motion to accept her application. But before we do that, is there any discussion from Tanny or Ken?
I don't have anything.
No.
So I'll entertain a motion. On the agenda, Wendy nicely laid out our motion that we need to make to move this nominee forward.
She doesn't need to be present, does she?
I don't believe so. We have an application in the agenda packet from her employer. Annalise comes to us, as a policy advisor with Metro. Her skill set will, it works very well with what we're doing.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Yes, Danny?
I move to nominate Annalise Kohler to seat number 4 on the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company Board representing Metro.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion before we go to vote? Hearing none.
I would just say, Tom, that just having worked with Annalise on the other board, that she's been a great, valuable contributor. So excited to have her on board.
I'm with you, Ken. Thank you for the words.
Great, thank you.
So roll call vote. Ken Anderson,
Aye.
Danny Stephenson,
Aye.
Tom Hansel votes aye. Motion carries 3-0. Jim, you explain what she's in for, right? More of the same, right?
I think the phrase she used with me is, I'm going to need to buy her a lot of hot chocolates, which I'm prepared to do.
And I will share, just Cheryl Norris is evaluating our board and, hoping we were able to convince her to consider that our 5th vacancy. So more to come on that. Moving on the agenda, and I apologize, we're 3 minutes behind. The relief wells update. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you all. I'm not going to take a lot of your time given the schedule, but I did want to provide you with an update on this investigation of your assets. So 1 second, I'll share my screen here. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, great. So I think this is possibly your first time seeing this material, but I'll still move through it very quickly. SDIC has 2 relief wells. They're adjacent to the pump station. They're literally right on the head wall for the outflow at the pump station and at the gravity wells. And their purpose is to help manage water that's coming up. There's a confined layer, or usually they're placed in places where there's a confined layer and you have water moving up and through the levee, and so it controls that seepage and delivers it back on the landward side and where the pump station can pump it over. So it I have a little slide here. So this is the little relief well on the right hand side, is shows you what we're talking about. So there are 2 relief wells at the Sandy pump station, and they were among they're among 5 others which are located in Pen 2, Levee Ready Columbia, in its effort to help provide assessments of the necessary work to bring the system into compliance and to address any major vulnerabilities or maintenance concerns. Did some testing of these facilities, and I believe this was the first test. Here's a little picture. You can see these are the well heads on top. Both of these vertical wells discharge out of the head wall here, right next to the pump station. These are the schematics. They're pretty low tech. They're basically vertical corrugated metal pipes that have perforations in the bottom where they pull in moisture flow through the bottom, and then it gets discharged into the forebay. We had a lot more extensive work to do in Pen 2 because of some debris that was clogging those wells. That was atypical. It was due to a construction project nearby. SDIC didn't have anything of that sort. It had its own sort of challenges. These are just pictures to show you the type of equipment that's used to do the CCTV. So we have extensive CCTV of your well. It shows the condition of it. These wells were all built in 1958, and so they're all starting to show their age. But that's actually not the main problem with the SDIC wells. The problem with the SDIC wells is they're actually, this picture down in the lower left, you can see the discharge is below the typical water elevations in the forebay, which made it a little bit of a challenge to test them. There's a thing called a pumping test to try to figure out how much flow they're capable of. Is the vertical well filter clogged or not? It's kind of hard to do when you have standing water on it. And what we found is that over time, sediment just moved into the well and packed into the bottom because of the nature of flow and gradients and things. That water is typically moving the opposite way through the well and packing the filter. So what they, sorry about that. Okay. So I'm making this very short and I'll be happy to answer any questions, but essentially what they do is they conduct this pumping test, they take the video and then they provide an assessment. Your results are included in a relief well document, which we can provide to any board members that are interested. The work was provided by Shannon Wilson, by their geotech team. And what they concluded was there's less than a 10 gallon per minute flow rate. And if that sounds like very little, that's because it is. And so these did not perform satisfactorily. Basically, the way that these were sort of designed were not a great configuration for them to be effective. If there was a lot of head on the outside of the system, so a high water event, it would drive flow through these and it might back flush the relief wells and unclog them a little bit, but they're not providing a substantive amount of flow. So the report, and I bring this up just because there's a report going to be floating out there that's going to say these wells really aren't adequate and they're not doing much. That said, in contrast to the Penn 2 wells, which had active boils and other things present when they decided to put them in 1958, these wells were, I think, a belt and suspenders approach, and there was no indication there was a specific need that they were addressing. There may have been some geology that led them to put these in, again, as a belt and suspender approach. There was no outlying concerns during previous events that I'm aware of in terms of boils or other things in the vicinity of the pump station there. So we have some ineffective wells. They don't seem to be causing any damage or producing any undesirable results. And so my recommendation is for the boards to just wait and see. And this is not a formal request for a recommendation, but we will have more information from you when we engage in the PED phase with the Portland Metro Levee System Army Corps study. This area is scheduled for a lot of work, both the levee raise in the immediate vicinity of these relief wells and some levee widening. That widening in and of itself may address any problem or any issue that would necessitate relief wells. So I think the main takeaway is we've assessed these. We don't think they're a great asset, and you know, there may be a decision in the future to pluck them, decommission them when we do this future work. But at this point, we don't believe that they're causing any harm to the system, and we will have more information for you when we get into the design phase with the Corps, should that hopefully happen.
Thanks, Mark. Tanny, Ken, questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Mark,
That's a
I like,
relief.
Mark, your staff recommendation sounds appropriate given the future plans of a pump station replacement. And leaving them alone until such time there's no threat of them just staying in the current state.
Well, again, we do know they've been in place since 1958, so they have weathered at least 2 major high water events of significance, and we haven't observed any deleterious effects. So at this point, hopefully we'll start PED in a year or so and start to draw some further conclusions on these. But I think we're in good shape. And of course, I've advised this is this conversation was had with Bill Owen and Kevin Severson, who's our geotech. So they're all aware of this, and we'll keep this in mind in their future CIP requests and practices.
Mark, very clear presentation. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be of service.
Jim, this is the time we all look forward to.
Oh yeah, let me try and get you back on schedule here. I'll be very brief. First, because you haven't quite completed your budget, it's time for us to start thinking about the assessments for next fiscal year. So that process has been launched, and we're beginning the work of defining our cost basis and cost drivers, and beginning the steps to work with the county to begin collection for next year to be able to generate the assessment revenues you need to operate. I want to thank Evan Mitchell. She's made good progress on some polling that we hope to launch in the next several weeks that will help us learn better how to work with the broader district of the urban district, the new people, understand where they're coming from on generating revenue to proceed with the transition to the new district. I want to let you know that we are getting prepared. Next week, we will be posting a job announcement for the interim position Keith is currently in. We've reconfigured that a little bit to be a director of finance and administration on par with Bill and Colin and Hong within the organization. We're excited about that recruitment, and we've retained the services of a person called Mary Rowe, who was part of the recruitment for my position. She's going to help us try and get a good pool. That position will be open for 5 weeks. And again, we hope to generate a really great response. As much as we love Keith, he's made it clear that he won't be with us forever. So we've also made a decision to post a position for an assistant finance manager to support Janet and her team. We see an awful lot of work coming at them to start up the new district and to work through the issues associated with dissolution. And so we're excited to be able to supplement that team with a new person. We should be making an offer next week to replace Brian Eberhardt, our emergency planner and project manager position. We're down to a top candidate, and engineering and planning have been able to agree on the skill set that we need. So that's really exciting. And then, as you may know, we did transition Emily Robertson over to a transition management position, helping us with all things moving to the new district. And we are close to selecting a candidate to backfill as an office manager for us, which we're excited about. And as Randy mentioned, we did add a new operations team member recently. I believe he started last Tuesday. And I had the good fortune of leaving the administration building just as he was walking out from the shop, and I didn't recognize him. So I stopped and said, "You must be the new guy. And how was day one?" And it was really uplifting to me because he reflected, he said, "Look around you. We have dump trucks and backhoes and welders and all sorts of things to tinker on. And I get to be outside. It's an awesome opportunity. I'm so excited to be here." So we're excited to have a new member of the operations team. And then last, I want to thank Hong. As you all probably are aware, Kelly Sherbo was taken away from us by our colleagues at Metro. It's a terrific opportunity for Kelly, and we're excited for her, and we're devastated to lose her. But Hong has done an amazing job lining up outside counsel to ensure that you get the legal advice you need, in addition to Brian, who's also super helpful. But we'll be relying a little bit on outside counsel as we move to a recruitment to replace Kelly. Actually, we won't replace Kelly, we'll hire another lawyer. And so Hong, thank you. And please be gentle with Hong if she's managing a ton of work. And I don't know if you want to say anything, Hong, but other than that, I think that's enough of a report from me. We are really excited that the core PED costs were incorporated into the president's budget. That was not expected, to be honest. And so our lobbyist was quite surprised by that, but it really does put us in a good position to get that next share of federal funding to match our local contribution. I also had the opportunity to correspond via text with Peter DeFazio, who's chair of the appropriate committee, to get us a broader word authorization. And again, I remain optimistic that he will use his leadership position to help us get authorized. Nothing's done until Congress votes. But things are looking generally quite positive. So with that, I can finish my report and we can move into your final business under executive session, unless there's questions.
Questions of Jim?
want to take an opportunity, sorry, Chair, President Hansel. So I just wanted to make note of a slight change I've made in the meeting agenda so that we're providing informational items related to the financial report and contract report, and including those in your packet, but not dedicating meeting time to those. So if at any time you do want to ask questions as part of that, please speak up and we'll get those questions answered. Or if you do prefer to keep it on the agenda, please let me know.
Wendy, thank you for including that material. We could probably just have that in open topics as we close if there's questions. Thank you for adding it. And Jim, thank you for your update. Just an amazing amount of work going on. And Hong, I feel for you anytime you lose an organization of your depth, you know, there's you and Kelly. So I sympathize. So
well,
good
Kelly
luck
is
on your-
literally a doctor of special districts, you know, so she's not somebody you can really replace. You just have to move forward.
So moving on into executive session. I go ahead and read this to transition. Is that correct, Hong?
Yes, so I'll ask all non-board members and non-MCDD staff to leave, except for Brian, of course. Brian is.
And one last acknowledgement of Cheryl Norris. Thank you for joining us today, and let us know what next steps you think are appropriate to keep your interest.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
And again,
Yep.
Cheryl, reach
Yep.
out if you have questions.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Find that language somewhere.
Okay, so we're expecting others to sign off. Is that right, Hong?
Yeah, we need non-essential staff and guests to drop off, so we can move into matters subject to litigation, potential litigation, just to be clear.
Just attorney advice, no litigation, attorney advice.
Jim, the language is in the agenda, so when we're ready to do that, and then I'll pause the recording.
I think it looks good.
We're good? Okay. Executive session, ORS 192.660, section 2, subsection F. We are to consider information or records that are exempt from disclosure by law, including written advice from your attorney. So turn it over to you, Hong.
Okay.
We need to turn recording. Yes, thank you, Wendy. Reading my mind. So can we have open session? Is that since it's not on the agenda, or any open items? Is that acceptable, Brian or Hong? It's not on the agenda, but is that, we're not going to take any action.
So it's just a best practice, Tom, if you're going to make decisions after you come out of an executive session, to let the public know that that's going to happen ahead of time, and we can do that. So I don't think there's any risk here, but you've got your two attorneys, but it's just a best practice issue, which is why I brought it up.
Yeah, I was only going to open it up if Ken or Tanny had any information sharing from their seats. I'm not expecting much, but Tanny or Ken, any information you want to share from Troutdale or the port?
Other than we've been working with, on projects that are unrelated to the districts, but my head's been buried in a massive EDA grant. So apologies if folks have been unable to reach me, or I haven't responded to an email in a timely manner, but that's the only thing we have.
Tanny, you're good?
Yeah, nothing exciting.
Yeah, from the county side, thank you, Jim, for trying to work on another time for the urban. I've been elevating, the difficulty for Commissioner Stegman to meet that time, and the absence of that seat at the table. The county doesn't want to have an empty seat. So thanks for working with that. We were actually, looking for another person if we couldn't find a better time. So my appreciations.
And that's
I'll just
really
say
Wendy,
that-
by the way. So Wendy's doing all the work.
Thank you,
I'm
Wendy.
saying the extra work is, it's not looking good, Tom, so I appreciate your efforts.
Yeah, I mean,
Find another time.
yeah, it's too important of a topic to not be at the table. So that's my communication to my leadership. So how they choose to respond, that's another matter. So Danny, you got your finger up?
Yeah, I just had one side comment since you kind of went down that trail. And it's not related directly to SDIC, but you've got an LRC meeting scheduled for late in the day on Monday.
Yep.
I know for myself, I'm not going to be able to make that because I have a city budget meeting that starts then. And so I don't think Eric Mueller is going to be available either. And those meetings have been on the calendar for like a year.
So we could run into quorum issues, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Tanny.
Okay.
I could poll if people wanted to start at 4 instead of 5:30. That would be an option.
Well, we need to get the budget approved, so we'll have to figure out a way to get that done. Thank you, Tanny, for the
You
heads
got
up.
May and June.
Yeah, no, we can get it done. Like I said, we're trying to finish up early so we can get moving on the assessments, to at least pin some of the numbers down. So, but again, we have time. We'll make it work. I will share too, in terms of the urban board, I did ask Mike Jordan to make some phone calls to a few members who have struggled with their participation. So he's agreed to do that. So we'll see what the results of those things are.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the robust discussion. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the SDIC board today. Have a wonderful
We'll follow
night.
up with Brian to ensure he's got good visibility into the work with Cable Houston. So thank you for being clear that that's your interest. We'll make sure and follow up on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. Bye, you guys.
Have a great day.
Thank you all for a good meeting. Thank you.